alongside a whole host of heavenly bodies.
On a clear autumn night, you can see about 1,500 stars with the naked eye.
This group of stars we call Orion. It's supposed to be the figure of a hunter. Over to the right is the constellation Taurus, the bull. Even further over, a star cluster, the Pleiades, or Seven Sisters. They're relatively young, only 60 million years old.
But there's one star that is more important to us than any other. It's also the closest star to us, and it's the one star that doesn't ever appear at night.
Because it's on our own doorstep, our sun seems much brighter than other stars, although as stars go, it's actually pretty feeble. Our sun is a burning ball of hydrogen, and it uses up 4 million tons of gas every second. The temperature at the center is millions of degrees. At the surface, just 6,000 or so. The heat given out by the sun is pretty well constant, which is lucky for us. All life on Earth is totally dependent on it. But conditions on Earth are not constant during the year. The change in seasons means greatly changing temperatures. Some people find that the onset of winter, with its short, gloomy days, even affects their moods and their capacity to work. The variation of the seasons is deeply embedded in all our lives. Every autumn in Cumbria, the farmers come down off the fells to sell their sheep at auction. It's obviously more popular with the farmers than with the sheep. These sheep were born in the spring and have been able to graze during the summer, but now the grazing is too poor. One false move here and I'd have bought my own flock.
So James, how long have you been farming up here?
45 years altogether with myself and father. And
so you've acquired the secret of sheep farming?
I think so, no. We'll never get that.
No. Is there one particular secret to it?
I don't think so, as long as you know more or less the times of year and seasons and such like. Oh, it makes a lot of difference to the seasons, yeah.
How long would you have during the winter?
Sort of from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 at night, at the best.
Of course, in the summer it's completely opposite.
Yeah.
Fairly dark.
Yeah. Hardly ever dark.
And it affects the grazing as well?
Yes, a lot. Up on the fells, well, in winter it never grows, in summer it's not too bad.
Well, James, we're fast becoming victims of the short days you were just mentioning.
Yes, it gets a lot colder in winter up here.
Does it really?
The grass
cold enough
stops
for me.
growing and it ends up, it's just like wire up here. And
yeah.
The younger sheep, they can't live on that.
So this is why you send them off to auction and
Yeah.
lot of sheep at this time of year. I think they're pretty happy to get off this
I
hill.
would think
actually.
so, yeah. But it isn't always like this.
No.
You
In
know.
summer, I'm sure it's wonderful up here.
For farmers, the changing seasons are crucial to their livelihood. Just on the other side of the hill is evidence that there's been an interest in the seasons around here for a long, long time.
The locals call this a Druid circle, but the Stone Age people who built it were almost certainly involved in farming of some sort. But why go to the trouble of building a circle like this?
There might well have been all sorts of strange and possibly rather fun pagan ceremonies held here at Swinside, but the stones also have a practical use. It would have been just as important then to know when to plant crops, when to bring the sheep in for the winter, and so on.
How do you keep track of the date if you're a Stone Age farmer? There's no calendar as we know it, but one thing they had worked out very well was how to use the position of the sun to tell them what time of year it was, although it's very unlikely that they understood anything about the basic mechanism of what they were observing.
We know now what they didn't. The Earth spins once on its axis every 24 hours, and at the same time slowly orbits the Sun, taking exactly a year to make one circuit. But how does this course the seasons?
If the Earth's axis was upright, we would get 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness every day of the year. Predictable maybe, but boring. But the Earth's axis is tilted. We lean over like this, and not always towards the sun like it is here. The axis of the Earth points towards the pole star, and so when the Earth goes around to the other side of the sun, it will be leaning away from the sun. This lean or tilt is what causes the seasons. When we're tilted towards the sun like this, you can see that the North Pole has permanent daylight, and the South Pole, which is tilted away from the sun, is dark. So, if you're going to be a polar explorer, you need to go to the right pole at the right time of the year, or you could find it in complete darkness.
So, in our summer, the further north you are, the more hours of daylight you'll get. In the winter months, it's the other way round, and the further north you are, the shorter the days. But there's something else about our relationship with the sun that changes throughout the year. Riggs Cottage, a small bed and breakfast in the Lake District.
You can do, yes. How many nights?
It's run by Fred and Hazel Wilkinson, who got rather less than they bargained for when they moved here.
Hazel and Fred, here we are in your home, Riggs Cottage, which is an interesting name. Do you know how it came to be called that?
Well, it's an old Cumbrian name, and it means on the side of a hill. So Riggs Cottage means, you know, the cottage on the side of a hill. But in the Lake District, there are lots of rigs.
And how long have you been here?
About 10 years.
And how do you fare during the winter?
We don't get any sun in the winter. We lose it right at the end of November. And in fact, we're due to get it somewhere around about now.
Because today is January the 17th, and this is rather a red letter day for you, isn't it? Because today is the day when the sun peeps above the fell.
That's right, that's right. It should get back around the hill. Yeah, the fell behind us.
Did you know about this when you moved?
No, we didn't. No, we weren't told about this.
So you sort of noticed it over a course of a number of years?
Well, the first winter we were in, we noticed that we'd lost the sun. But we'd been in 2 or 3 years, I think, and Hazel stood at the kitchen sink one day, and she said, "It's back. We've got the sun back." And so it was a Glenfiddich day, wasn't it?
It was that,
Aye,
yes, yeah.
aye.
How does it make you feel, Hazel, when you have to go through a really large part of the winter with absolutely no glimpse of the sun at all?
It can get you a bit depressed, really. But, you know, you don't. You keep yourself going and whatnot. But it is nice to get it back.
Well, Hazel and Fred, you've persuaded me to walk up the side of another Cumbrian hillside, or should I say rig, and now we're looking down at your cottage. And nature has come up with the goods because the sun is peeping over the ridge there and shining down, catching the side of your cottage. So from here on, summer approaches, and every day the sun will get higher and you'll get more sun.
That's right. It's a grand sight. It's a grand sight. We can start doing the garden again now.
That's good.
Well, here's a toast to celebrate the day the sun came back into your lives, right?
That's nice,
Cheers.
isn't it? Goodness.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
I suppose you could call this a small pagan ceremony, although the only sacrifice is whiskey. I could get used to this pagan business. At Swinside in midsummer at midday, the sun reaches a height of 58 degrees above the horizon. So not only are the days long, but the sun is high in the sky. That's why it's hotter in summer. It's got nothing to do with how far we are from the sun. In the winter, the sun only reaches 12 degrees above the horizon at noon. It's a short day, and the sun's rays are much more spread out. That's why it's winter. So the sun's height at midday changes from one day to the next.
Now, how might I tell the date using just the sun and a piece of paper? It has a scale down here corresponding to the degrees of the height of the sun, and also a little hole just here. And I have to make this into a cylinder, using my handy stick of glue here. Up there. Good. And somehow managed to fold this over. Sliding it into position. And then I have to stand it so that the sun shines through the hole and reads off on the scale here, and that's about 18 degrees. Now, I just happen to have here a scale, and we'll see down here on the left-hand side those degrees. And if I put a ruler here at 18 degrees, which is about there are two possible dates it could be. It's either February, these are marked off into 5-day marks here, and this is either around about the 15th of February, I guess, or about November the 15th. Well, it's actually, I can tell you, is November the 10th, so we're about 5 days out, but there you go.
The people that built Swinside would have wanted to know where they were in the year, just like modern farmers. They would have known that the sun was high in the sky in the summer and low in the winter, but they wouldn't have been able to measure that height accurately. Instead, they measured something else. They used these stones to line up the position where the sun rises on the horizon over the course of a year.
Although we talk about the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, it's actually more complex than that. The position of sunrise and sunset changes during the course of the year, as the people who built Swinside 4,000 years ago were all too aware.
Swinside is a giant calendar. At midsummer, the sun rises at this point on the horizon, time for fairs and festivals. By the time of Lunaza, the pagan festival in August, the sun rises here. Time to cut the first corn harvests. By September, the time of the fruit harvests, the sun is rising here. Samhain marks the beginning of winter. It's time to slaughter livestock and commemorate the festival of the dead. By the pagan festival of Yuletide, the position of the sunrise has moved further still along the horizon. Yule is the Anglo-Saxon word for the balance point of the year, the lowest ebb of sunlight. But Yule also marks the beginning of the rebirth of the sun's power. The height of the sun, the position it rises on the horizon, the changing day length, and the corresponding season of the year are all related. On June the 21st, the longest day of the year, the sun rises almost northeast. The northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. As the earth turns, the sun appears to us to make a large arc in the sky, and the sun sets almost northwest. 3 months later, in September, at the autumn equinox, the sun rises due east. We get a 12-hour day, and the sun sets due west. But when we reach December the 21st, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun. The sun rises almost southeast and doesn't get very high before setting almost southwest. On this day, there are just 7 hours of daylight.
And so these stones are like markers, indicating the seasons as the sunrise moves slowly along the horizon. And here, between these large stones, which form a kind of gateway, is the principal alignment of the circle. Stand in the center of the ring, and this is where the sun will rise on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year.
When the sun rose at this point on the horizon, they knew it would go no further. Solstice means literally standing still. It would then start to move back the other way. The days would start to get longer again, and spring was on the way. The sun is not quite as constant as you might think. The surface of the sun sometimes shows strange markings which can affect our lives. The sunspots were studied for many years at Stonyhurst College, a boarding school in Lancashire.
Then in the mid-1860s, there was a...
Fintan O'Reilly runs the Astronomy Society at the school, but it's a society with a difference, sitting as they do on a bit of astronomical history. The observatory was built in 1860, and it houses a very large telescope. Professional astronomers used it for studying the sun up until the 1940s. Now it's a giant windfall for Fintan and the school society.
It's a very impressive telescope, Fintan.
Yes, it's a very large 15-inch refractor, and we're very lucky to have this. And it's been here since 1893, and it's with this instrument that a lot of the Stonyhurst sunspot drawings have been done from 1880 to about 1940, using the solar projection method of casting the sun's image onto a prepared blank circle and then drawing in the sunspots, and then from day to day doing further drawings to follow the drift of sunspots across the face of the sun. Unfortunately, the weather's not been favourable for us today, so no. I thought we might have a look at one of the old drawings.
Yeah. This is in the one I made earlier department, is it?
Yes, indeed, right. It comes from over 100 years ago, in September 1893, and it's a time, as you can see immediately, of quite high activity on the surface of the sun.
Yes.
And we can see over on the western edge 3 large groups there, which are shortly going to disappear off the western edge round to the other side of the sun. And over here we've got an extremely large group approaching the centre of the sun. And then if we look just towards the eastern limb of the sun, there is an interesting group promising coming round into view.
And I noticed that this was made on a day of frequent clouds.
Indeed, weather frequent clouds. It took them, I think, something like 1.5 hours to complete the drawing because of the weather conditions. The day before was a complete blank, and the day after a complete blank. But then after that, there was a series of 4 days in which they had clear conditions, and they got a very nice series of 4 drawings showing these spots here, the central group and the eastern group, going right across the face of the sun.
Sunspots are areas of intense activity on the sun's surface, and they have a natural rhythm. Every 11 years or so, the number of sunspots is at its highest. Solar max, it's called. Nobody knows for sure what causes this cycle. But we do know that sunspots can affect us here on Earth.
Now tell us the point of the research, the observing.
The main reason that why they were interested here at Stonyhurst in the sunspots was that they were trying to tie it in with activity in the Earth's magnetic core, sometimes shown, as we know, with displays of the aurora borealis. Now, it had been noticed that in the 11-year cycle, when the sun was very active, there were more frequent aurora than at the time of the quiet sun. And we were doing magnetic measurements here in another building, and they decided the astronomical side of the Stonyhurst Observatory would then be fruitfully put to studying the sunspots. And they were really searching for the correlation between the activity on the surface of the sun, most noticeably the spots, and the magnetic activities shown most beautifully by the aurora borealis. And that was the main area of research in astronomy in Stonyhurst.
Sunspots also affect radio reception. Radio hams report unusual reception every 11 years.
So any other significant observations were made in that time?
Well, some of the Stonyhurst astronomers did travel the world on solar eclipse expeditions, but they were very fortunate to have on site the last total eclipse of the sun that was visible in England back in 1927. And you can imagine the excitement that this brought to Stonyhurst, that here was a large instrument on the path of totality, and they spent about 2 years preparing for that. Unfortunately, it was only a 20-second eclipse at about 5:30 in the morning, and while all the experts and the professionals were in here with all the cameras, there was a small cloud that obscured, so cloud again, a small cloud that obscured the disk of the sun in those vital 20 seconds. But by good fortune, the boys out on the playground this side and the playing fields this side, they all got a glimpse of the eclipse. The experts, alas, nothing.
It's a moral there, son, wasn't it?
There's a theory that the 11-year cycle of sunspots affects our weather here on Earth. Scientists don't have enough data yet, but anyone can have a go. You could discover something new, and you don't need an enormous, expensive telescope to do it.
Pam, hello. I can see you're all set up, so let's just say that you're going to show us how to do a fairly simple solar projection with a fairly basic equipment.
Yes, you don't need, as you can see, you don't need specialised equipment at all. This is a very basic telescope, one that you can buy in any electrical store on the high street or from a catalogue. And what I have doing here is getting the sun's image through the telescope, and I'm using a star diagonal to bend the light sideways into the projection box here. You don't actually need to have a telescope. You can do this with binoculars, and some telescopes won't have a star diagonal, in which case the image is then brought out at the back of the telescope, so you'd have to have a piece of paper here.
Yeah.
But then you'd have to just have a piece of card just to shield the direct sun's rays.
Because, of course, otherwise the sun would actually be shining on the image.
That's right, yes.
Right.
But you can see quite a lot of detail. You can see the sunspots, you can see the greyness and the darker areas, and it's quite easy to set up.
Really is a very clear image, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yes, I mean, obviously you need a clear day. Any light cloud will obviously sort of make the details disappear. But
What's amazing is that you can have such a clear image from something that's so hard to look at if you're actually looking at the sun.
yes, that is one thing, that you must never look directly at the sun, and especially never ever look at the sun through either a telescope or binoculars or anything like that. You can serious damage. You can cause blindness by doing that.
Really?
So you have to be very careful.
Why are sunspots so interesting to an astronomer, Pam?
Well, they're interesting for many reasons. One is that's something you can see with quite simple equipment, and sunspots change. They move across the sun's disk over a period of about 2 weeks. So if you look at a sunspot one day and then you come back a couple of days later, it will appear to have moved. And this is because the sun is rotating. And another way that they will change is that the spots themselves change shape. They get larger, they get smaller, they get lots of little tiny spots coming out by the side of them, and just watching them change is quite fascinating.
In 1890, an astronomer called Maunder, having looked back through the records, found that there was an unexplained period, now known as the Maunder minimum, where there were no sunspots. He thought that there might be a link between the low solar activity and the so-called mini ice age, which lasted in Europe between 1450 and the beginning of the 1800s.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
One young man, born in 1812, lived through the end of that mini ice age. His memories were of one white Christmas after another, festive times with hospitality, merriment, crackling fires, and most important, loads of snow.
In the snow.
He became a writer, and his stories helped to give us our modern image of what Christmas should be. His name was Charles Dickens. There aren't many white Christmases in Britain these days, but Dickens' memory of them somehow persists. Maybe the sunspots will have another period when they're absent, and maybe there will be another mini ice age. If so, then maybe all our Christmases will be white again.
Your Christmases be white.
We put together an astronomy project pack which will help to get you started if you'd like to find out more about the night sky. If you'd like a pack, please send a cheque or postal order for £9.99 made out to BBC Education to this address. Astronomy Pack, P.O. Box 7, London W3 6XJ.
More about the solar system tomorrow night on BBC Two, when the Open University's Images of the Cosmos series shows there's more to the sun than meets the eye. Our Invisible Sun is at midnight tomorrow on BBC Two.